Good morning and welcome to Lattes and Leaders with Dr. Brad Johnson, best-selling author and accomplished public speaker specializing in education and educational leadership. I am your co-host, Jeremy Johnson, organizational psychology consultant specializing in career coaching, training, and development. Meet us here each week to discuss topics in education and leadership and meet with some of the top education talent and thought partners from across the globe. So grab your latte, sit back, and enjoy a relaxed conversation that will leave you informed and encouraged. We are here this morning with Dr. Kristi Blakeway. How are you doing?
Great, thank you.
Hey, good morning. So glad to have you on. One of our educational experts from up north from us. So welcome this morning or this afternoon.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, let's dive in. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey so far and maybe some of the things that you're working on currently?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm currently a director of instruction with Surrey Schools. Surrey is the largest school district in British Columbia. We have about 137 schools, but the number changes almost every time we open another school. It's growing over the summer. But I've spent 25 years in education. I was a high school teacher, a high school counselor, a vice principal, and principal at the high school level, and also a principal at elementary. So I've worked from K to 12 and recently completed my doctorate with Western University in Canada in Ontario. And I'm now working with Surrey Schools as a director of instruction. And I'm excited to be here and chat with you today.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. And congratulations on your doctorate. I know how hard that is personally. And
Thank
I
you.
and I tell people I still remember after I defend the dissertation and they tell you I don't know how they did it with you, but I had to go out of the room for a minute. And then when I walked back in, they're like, congratulations, Dr. Johnson. And it's just a surreal moment that kind of you've worked so hard towards, and just that moment that you get that recognition. It's just pretty cool,
Mhm.
pretty surreal
It
moment.
is. Yeah, absolutely. With us, they had us wait for an email. So they told us, you just wait and an email will arrive. And then this very neutral email arrived that said, your dissertation has been uploaded to the, you know, library or whatever. And we thought, is that it? Is that the email? And I guess it was. So they could learn from
Oh.
your institution.
Maybe they'll listen to this and say, hey, maybe we need to be a little bit
We
more
could improve that.
celebratory.
Exactly.
Well, I'm interested to hear about your time as a counselor and maybe how that has informed your leadership.
Mm.
Sure. Yeah, I think it definitely was a turning point for me because when I started to work as a high school counselor, you were all of a sudden privy to so many stories. And, even though as a teacher, I always tried to connect with my students, you're also busy teaching too, and you don't get to spend that time just one on one talking to students in the same depth as you do as a counselor. And it just really opened my eyes to all of the different lived experiences our students have. And I also started to think critically about our school system and how it works for some of our students and it doesn't work for some. And what, rather than always expecting children to change, what can we do to be learning from our kids where the system doesn't meet their needs? How can we learn from our students and focus on shifting our system rather than shifting kids? So that definitely was it was one of my favorite jobs and probably where I learned the most, and it shifted, I think, my leadership approach, that it became more about leaning in and listening and understanding everyone's stories, whether that's with adults or with students.
Mm. I think that's so true. I love that because I think as a leader, not that we're necessarily counselors, but having that empathy and listening and being able to kind of step in their shoes a little bit is, even with adults, because, as a principal, even the staff, they have, issues, things they face. And it's just so important to build that connection with them, where that you can
Absolutely.
be empathetic and help them. So I love that, and that is a good background and strength to have. I think that you carried with you into the leadership roles too.
Yeah, thank you. I've always said as a principal to the staff that I work with that my goal and my hope is to create an environment where teachers and support staff love coming to work, because if I can do that, then that ripple effect is there where they're creating that climate where students love coming to school. But absolutely, we need to start by loving our adults first if we're expecting them to be in that space with the ability to love our kids when they get there. So,
I love that. Yeah, that is sage advice.
I really want to hear about Beyond Hello. Know that
sure.
everybody's waiting. Yeah.
Okay, for sure. So, so let me start by saying I'm sure many educators are the same in that I love to make lists. I like to plan, I like to organize, I like to if I'm going to go on I don't know what you call them in different cities, they're called different things. Here we call it a field trip if you take the students
Hmm.
out into the community. Is that the term you use?
Yeah, yeah.
And so, the paperwork that goes around with it and that everything is planned. So, the intention was on November 30th, 2009. I was going to take some students, and we were going to. I had a great group of leadership students that year, and they really wanted to make a difference in the community. And they wanted to. We have a large homeless population in Vancouver. There is about 6 blocks of the downtown core that is the poorest postal code in Canada, and it's called the Downtown East Side. And it's absolutely struck with poverty and addiction. And so my students really wanted to go to that neighborhood in particular and help out. And many organizations and schools do. And so it was nearing Christmas time, and they thought, well, what do people living on the streets need? So we thought of food or clothing or blankets, this kind of thing. And then right before we were about to go for the first time, the newspaper, back when we had newspapers on our doorsteps, the newspaper ran an article that talked about how many schools in Vancouver were helping in the exact same 6 blocks during the same weeks during Christmas time, and that some of these people living on the streets were basically having piles of clothing and food provided, but it might not be matching their needs. And so I canceled our field trip. Now, if you have ever canceled a field trip near Christmas with students, you don't become the most popular educator. They were not happy. And so we had a conversation around why were they upset. And basically we got to the place where they said, it's about them too. They wanted not only to miss school, but they also wanted to experience that joy of giving and helping. And I took that away from them. And so we thought, well, what would it be like if there's that joy that comes from giving? If you're on the streets, do you have that opportunity to be giving to people in your community or to your family when your finances are that tight? And so we thought, what if we come up with something we can give people that they can then give away so they experience that same joy of giving? And so I had been into scrapbooking for a little bit. And then I had another child who needed the bedroom. So I had all these craft supplies in a closet, brought them out, and we ended up making blank Christmas cards that year. And we intended to go for 4 hours from 11 till 3. And we were taking our blank Christmas cards that we had made, and we were inviting people on the streets to take the cards and give them to people in the community, or if they wanted to write to family or friends they may have lost touch with, and that we would take the cards back and mail them on their behalf. And we had no idea if that would work. We just had some hope and optimism. And that very first day, we had a handful of people reach out and ask for our help connecting with family, and they wrote in the cards. And teenagers are very good at using the internet, as you know. And so we used every type of online phone directory or social media sites. And within hours, when I was back in my counseling office, we were just using the school phones to phone numbers across North America. And we started to find families who hadn't heard from their loved one sometimes for years. And so you can see how the field trip quickly went from supposed to end at 3 o'clock and be done to, oh, we have some work to do. So that led to like our first face-to-face connection where we flew a family together, and it hasn't ended. We're 15 years in, and last Christmas we connected our 1000th family.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is, I
That's
love that
amazing.
story. Wow.
So now we have kids like kindergarten to university involved. So we have our kindergarten through grade 7 students help decorate the cards. High school students go to the streets. Teachers and educators help me with the students finding families. And then a lot of the students who are in university now or college, they're still involved helping do the research and relocating, or not relocating, reuniting families. So yeah, it's been awesome.
Wow, that is beautiful. And what a
Thank
way to let the students, because that's part of my thing being in education for 30 plus years. I'm like, regardless of the social economic of the students, it's so important for them to give back, and it's so important for them to see that there are people that are worse off, and to be able to make that kind of impact on your community. And that is a real impact. That's not just let's show up and do something for a couple hours, like you said, but you're really, changing lives in a way because they're connecting with people that there's no way they would have been able to. So that's wow, that's powerful.
Thank you.
Is there maybe a snippet that you would like to give out from your book Beyond Hello?
Well, it's interesting. One of my favorite people is one of the main people I talk about in my book. So in my book,
Mhm.
Beyond Hello, I tell the stories of people on the streets that we've met. And although we started out with the intention to help, we realized pretty quickly that we were the ones kind of gaining more and learning more. But what was really neat is we we decided to evolve beyond just Christmas and Mother's Day with cards, and
Mm,
we decided once a month to take people to lunch and just hear their story with a few students at a time. And so the very first woman we met was a lady named Cindy, and she was struggling with HIV, hepatitis, and heroin addiction. And she told us that she was from Ontario, and she had offered her child up for adoption because she was in an abusive relationship in Ontario and didn't feel that she could be a mom at that time. And she had always wanted to meet her daughter.
mm.
And so when she met us, she told us, my daughter's name is Paige. She was born in Ontario. I know the birthday, and that's all I know, but she didn't even have a last name. So we felt bad actually because we felt like we've opened up these wounds and now we've maybe gone too far, because how do you find someone without a last name? And so we really became intense on social media, looking through every Facebook account with that birthday and that name, enough that I did get a warning from Facebook that I was maybe messaging too many people named Paige. But eventually, we did find Paige through social media, and she had just started to look for her birth mom. And so she told me, I said, well, I need to tell you about your mom. She's in a rough state. She's in Vancouver. She's struggling with addiction. And she said to me, oh, I know all about that neighborhood, the downtown east side of Vancouver. And so I asked her how she knew about it. And she said she had become pregnant herself in Ontario. She had been struggling with addiction too. And someone had suggested a book to her called In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts. It's written by Dr. Gabor Mate. And when she read that book, it was all about his patients in Vancouver and their struggles. And there was a woman in the book named Celia who had been pregnant and how she fought her addiction to be able to parent a child. It resonated so much that she was able to, get herself off the drugs and be a mom. And she had written to the author to thank him. So she was very open to meeting Cindy. So when I went back to Cindy and said, we found your daughter, she wants to meet you, Cindy actually said no. She said, I can't until I go into rehab. I can't let my daughter see me like this. And I said, no, no, she doesn't judge. She's read this book about the neighborhood. And I said to Cindy, by chance, have you ever met Dr. Gabor Mate, the author of the book? And she looked up at me and she's like, In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts. And I said, well, how do you know the name of his book? And she said, well, he's my doctor in the book. My name is Celia. And
Wow.
so her birth daughter had been reading all about a woman enough that she thought it had changed her life, and she had no idea she was reading about her own mother. So
Wow.
that was definitely our most amazing connection. And we were able to, Cindy checked herself into rehab after being on the streets for over 20 years. And they had a beautiful reunion a few months later, and Cindy was able to stay off drugs ever since. So we reconnected them in 2014. So she's been drug free for 10 years now, and just talked to her the other day. So it's just been an amazing journey to be part of.
That
Oh,
is so
absolutely.
amazing. Wow. And
Thank you.
it boils down to what I always say, everything is about relationships. And when you take
Hmm.
the time to listen to people, listen to their story, like you said, walk a mile in their shoe or just sit with them in their
Exactly.
story, that is powerful. Wow.
Thank you.
And there's no telling how many lives have been touched because of that. Think of all the students that you've, you know, let
Hmm.
experience that and that go forth and do great things just because you took the time to allow them to develop even that type of short, relationship with people. That's just so powerful. I love that. I can't wait for us to share this.
Awesome. Yeah, a lot of the students have shifted their focus area of post-secondary as they've gone through, and a lot of them have ended up in all of the helping professions, from nursing to education to different charities and whatnot. So it's neat to see where it's led them.
That is awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. I know that's
Of course.
something it's not that you're proud of, but you are, like you're
Yeah,
humbled that you're able to
absolutely.
do it, but wow, that's such a powerful
Yeah.
message. And we'll definitely share the book for people to be able to read as well,
Awesome.
including me.
Here you go. I can send you a copy. You send me your address. I'll put one of these in the mail for you.
I'll do it. As
Okay,
long as you
perfect.
sign it.
Okay, it's a deal.
So let's talk for a minute about how we can learn from our students.
Mm,
Mm,
absolutely. Well, that is one of my biggest passions is, sometimes we will pay lots of money to go to expensive conferences and hear people speak and read books and whatnot. And yet I always find our students, even our youngest ones, are just so wise, and I can learn so much from them. And whether it's through their behavior or whether it's through their words, our kids are always giving us messages. And I don't know that in education we often pause and ask our students what's really working for them and what isn't. One of the things that we've started doing this year in Surrey schools is we host about 25 student forums a year around our district, where we invite students from elementary or secondary just to gather together, and with a series of guiding questions. And one of the activities we did this year is we just used pillowcases, and we had gave the kids a whole bunch of fabric markers, and on one side of the pillowcase it said, what keeps you up at night? And we
mm.
prefaced it by saying, like, somewhat related to school, like if your dog keeps you up at night, we can't help, but if it's anything school related that causes you anxiety, like, to let us know. So anything that causes anxiety or stress that's related to school, what keeps you up at night? And the students were so amazing at just sharing everything from academic issues or test anxiety, or relationship issues, friendships, but also things like hunger, or having to work right after school and not having enough time or enough money. And then we had our students flip the pillowcase over, and we asked them what the school day would need to look like for them to have a perfect sleep and imagine that perfect school system. And it really just opened up that even creativity for our students of what could school look like if it really met their needs. And our teachers and our principals and our superintendent have all been very receptive, wanting to hear from the students. And the students have gone on to kind of share the data they've collected, and whether it's staff meetings at school or meetings with in our district, we have an elected board of trustees that the students were able to meet with and share their thoughts. And so we are trying to shift so that when we speak about student voice, it's not so much a leadership opportunity for students, that it's more an opportunity for the adults in our system to learn from our students who are, our current clients of our system. And how do we lean in and listen? I mean, one of the things that we're facing in Surrey is that we are growing incredibly fast. Our school district is growing by about 2,500 students per year, and we
Wow.
can't even build schools that fast. So, you know, the older we get, sometimes the less creative we are in our responses. And so, one of the things we decided to do is we went to our kindergarten students and we asked them what would they do. And they may not have solved all of our growth problems, but it was just neat to see how creative they were in terms of like
Mhm.
building up. Or one little guy wanted to dig down and find space. And he said, I usually dig for gold, but I could dig for a school for you. And so just allowing our kids to just be creative and have their ideas included, I think has shifts the way we lead and the way that we, see our students as change makers. So
That's you had two really good points there. One of when you talk about creativity, in one of our books, we talk about the research with NASA. There was these sociologists, their names was Jarman and Land, and basically they did a lot of what they call creative genius type assessments for NASA. But long story short, what they found is they did it with adults, they did it with children, then they did a longitudinal study with children. And what they found is that children around the age of 4 or 5, almost it was 98%, so almost all of them function at a creative genius level. But by the
wow.
time they're 18 years old, only 2% of them function at that level. And, that's a shame because there's all that creativity and stuff. And it sounds strange to ask a kindergartner, but they have that creativity. It hasn't been like shut out or boxed out from,
Exactly.
formal education. Another thing you said was about the client. And that just really resonates with me because education doesn't like to really think about it sometimes, but we are a business and the students, they're not our customer, they're our client because a client has a better relationship with the person. Like
Hmm.
for a hair salon or somebody that's personal training, they have a client, not just a customer.
Hmm.
And
True.
so you have to listen to that person and get feedback and work with them to develop whatever their goals are, whatever their needs are. And I'm right with you that the two most important pieces of education typically is the student and the teacher, and they have the least voice, which just always
Yeah, we need to
amazes
shift
me.
that. Exactly. Exactly. And that's always how I think we learn the most. I mean, our kids just they love the opportunity to tell us as well, like not just on what's working, what isn't, but what matters most to them and how are we embedding that in the community. When we asked our students their top priorities this year, the two that they identified were mental health and racial equity. And
Mm.
so to hear our young ones have that, that maturity to be able to really care for everyone in their community and want to have that focus throughout their education was powerful.
Well, and I think the work that you do with the homeless and stuff reinforces that, though, that everybody can be down, everybody can, make mistakes, but everybody has a story and everybody deserves a second or a third or a fourth chance.
Exactly. And it's if we engage with that curiosity rather than judgment, then we're able to understand what's happening, whether that's a
Mhm.
student, a staff member, someone on the streets, with the people that are living on the streets. After taking hundreds of people for lunch and just hearing their story, I don't know if I had lived any of the stories they have shared. I don't know that I would be in any better place than they are right now, and that often they are in the safest place from the options they had. And yeah, it's humbling to hear some of these stories, but I'm a big advocate for kind of reaching out to the margins and learning from where things are not working so that we can become better as a system and take care of everyone.
That's that counselor background coming forth.
Yes, absolutely.
So I wanted to take a minute and talk about a couple of your accolades, the
Sure.
YWCA Woman of Distinction and BC Medal of Good Citizenship.
Yeah, so it's been an honor to receive those awards and recognition. The first, the YWCA in our community honors women once a year in different categories, and one of the categories they have is around connecting the community. And that one was really meaningful to me because for most of their categories, the panel of executives decides who the recipient will be. But for that particular category, it's put out to the community. So it was really meaningful to me that the community saw our work as valuable. And with that came $10,000 to be able to give back to the downtown Eastside community. So that was a great experience. And then, it was during COVID that I won the for British Columbia the BC Medal of Good Citizenship, and it was kind of funny because it was the start of COVID. Everything in schools was stressful. I had one of those issues in a school that had blown up where the media was calling left, right, and center, and kind of one of those days you don't really want to be the principal. And so someone phoned me and they said they were from our Ministry of British Columbia, from the government. And I just almost had a breakdown because I thought, like, oh God, like this issue has spiraled that far. What is happening? And they said, you've won this award. And I was like, what? I had no idea I'd even been nominated. And I actually had to ask her, like, are you sure you have the right number? Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Anyway, she explained that the some of the parents and staff from our school had put forward the nomination without me knowing, and had talked about my leadership in the school and also our work beyond hello. And so, yeah, so then I was honored to receive what BC has. They call it their Medal of Good
Oh,
Citizenship. So that was an honor as well.
well, congratulations. Yeah,
Thank you.
that is an honor indeed. And just a reflection of the work that you put in and the relationships and focus is just impacting the community.
Thank you.
What qualities do you see as making the biggest impact on being a great leader in education?
Well, this probably will not surprise you, but I would say compassion,
Mhm.
understanding everyone's story, connection, and just really taking time to connect with students, with teachers, with parents. I would also say love. I don't think it's a word we use very often in education, but it's the core of what we do. And then just that optimism and that genuine love of learning, and that belief that every child and every adult can learn. Sometimes I think we have that belief for our children. And as leaders, sometimes we don't extend that same courtesy to our staff that or our parent community, that we are all learners. And if we see our adults through that same lens of compassion and a growth mindset, then we can all move forward together and support one another.
That's a good answer. Yeah, well, I'm definitely with you on that. Compassion's just often a missing piece of leadership, of just connecting with them on a
Mhm.
personal level and understanding them. It's hard to lead someone if you don't know them that well.
And I also find it's hard to dislike someone when you know them well. It's
Right.
easier to dislike someone if you don't know them very well. And once you get to know each other's story, that those walls come down. And, I would say as a principal, sometimes there's tensions that exist, especially when things go wrong in a school around discipline or whatnot, around people sometimes have varying views of how a child should be disciplined. I found, parents definitely want compassion for their own child, but they would like punitive measures for someone else's child. And so
Right.
it's just always finding that balance. But one of the things that I always said to staff as well is, it may look like I'm being too kind to the child. It may look like, yes, you might see them having hot chocolate as we're talking through what happened, but that I will always extend that same courtesy to them. If they come to school and they are having their worst day, or if they're in the place that they're about to flip their desk, then I will buy them a hot chocolate and sit down as well. And that, if we think about the space, if we think about our own worst day and what's going on for us in those moments and what we need, it's very rare that we say, oh, we just needed some punishment or we needed some shame or whatnot. That it's generally
Right.
that we
Yeah.
we needed someone to be, take time with us. We needed to go for a walk. We needed some time to connect. We needed someone to just listen to everything going on. So I would say that guides my leadership.
I like that. Yeah.
Can you tell us about some of the challenges you faced in your leadership roles?
Sure. So one, as I was just mentioning, like sometimes my dissertation focus was around reimagining school discipline through a lens of equity, well-being, and decolonization. My family has Indigenous ancestry as well, and so one of my goals is to really learn about our Indigenous cultures as much as I can, and what can we learn from Indigenous people in terms of accepting everyone and wrapping people in community and supports. Sometimes I think one of our biggest hurdles in education is just the status quo itself. And how do we let go of that fear of change to
Mm,
try things in a new way? Um, when things are not working, rather than hanging on to the belief that a child or a staff member or a parent for that matter would be better served somewhere else. How instead do we get to a place where we can connect and wrap people in support? And that's hard because when there are students with really challenging behavior in our school system, it can impact everyone, of course, and the well-being of all students is important to me. So how do we hang on to that collective wisdom of wrapping students with support, and bringing people closer in those hard times instead of pushing them out of classes, to the office, out of the school, whatever it may be. So that's definitely been a challenge. The other one I would say, I was a principal or vice principal at, oh, 5 or 6 or 7 different schools. One of the things that was hard for me to learn was that as a leader, you really need to move at that speed of trust. That what works at one school doesn't naturally work at another school, and that in some spaces you could connect community really quickly and have people on board that were ready to jump in and collaborate and be creative and move forward, and in other spaces, for whatever reason, that trust did not exist amongst staff members or within the community. And so the first time I worked in that kind of environment, that was hard for me because I didn't, you kind of trust yourself and you think, if I'm making good decisions and if I'm being genuine and authentic, then people will be on board and we'll just work together. But that you have to actually slow down and understand the context, understand why that mistrust may be there, and build those relationships first before you're able to kind of move ahead. So just understanding that every school, like every community, has its own unique needs, and that they're not all going to operate at the same speed.
and you're so right. I mean, and you coming into a new school, what happened before you got there, you have no control over, but it really does affect the culture. If it was a poor leader or, whatever the situation was, usually there's a reason, people want to move an administrator to another school, to fix something, to work on something. So you're absolutely right. You never really know what situation you're going into. The other thing with
Mhm.
that too is it's education. So you're stuck with who's there. It's not like you're
Right.
bringing your own people that you've already built those relationships with. So,
Exactly.
but I think you hit on the right point. Even if it's extra work or takes a little longer, trying to build those relationships with them first and get that buy-in, that trust. We call that, yeah, building trust capital. It really
Mhm.
is so important being able to change the school culture.
Absolutely.
Okay, so this is one of my favorite questions to ask. Tell us about a teacher or two that had the greatest impact on your personal development.
Well, I love that question because I had two teachers who really stand out to me. One was my in junior high, Skip Roberts was my he was actually my high school counselor. And then when I went on to grade 11 and 12, which was our high school model at the time, I had a teacher, Rich Chambers, who he was a classroom teacher at the time. He was my social studies and history teacher, but is now also a counselor. But what's interesting is, so they're both, I think, in their mid to late 70s now. And I've actually had the opportunity this year to visit with both of them. And so it's been neat. When I think about what made them so amazing to me was they not only that they saw leadership qualities in me and gave me opportunities as a student and trusted me and appreciated my creativity, they also just they really connected beyond the school level. And it was just really about that relationship and almost what I would now call friendship. I mean, I'm 50 and they're in their 70s, and I've, stayed in touch with them. So, there's periods of time where we lost touch, but in the last few years, I've been able to connect with both of them again. And they were just both the type who had fun at work, laughed, loved students, got to know them on a personal level too, really encouraging, and just, saw potential in me, even on days that I might not have seen it in myself. Maybe too much. If I think back to about 1990, my social studies teacher would always lend me the keys to his car when I didn't have a transportation so I could go get McDonald's at lunch. I don't know if I would have done that. It was a different time. Um,
Right.
but, you know, anyway, they're just amazing people and made a big difference. And probably even on those harder days, like when things weren't always going great as a teenager, they were the ones that kind of had creative ways to just listen and find out what was going on and be supportive. So it made a huge difference for me.
We've had several leaders that have shared that someone that impacted them was a leader that saw the potential in them that they may not have seen yet. And I think that's so important. I always tell, regardless of the role, principals, district level, be a talent scout. Look for the
Mhm.
talent in people, look for their strengths, look for what they may not even see in themselves yet. And because we tell teachers to do that, believe in the
Mhm.
students even if they don't believe in themselves yet. And so I think that's such a powerful thing, and I think it's helped a lot of people move to the next level or achieve things that they may not have if they didn't have that person there to encourage them and see that in them and help them develop that. I think that's a powerful thing for leaders to do.
Absolutely. And I think, not only seeing that talent in our young teachers, in our students, but also when you're able to be in a position where you have that perspective of connecting, with all with the community, how do you help pair people up almost and see those connections of when you find out what someone else is really passionate about, and that there's another teacher down the hall that they might not even know yet that has those same interests, and how do you create those mentorship and partnerships and have staff working collaboratively, that sometimes you have that bird's eye view and you're able to build those connections a little bit faster. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm.
All right, well, we got one last, this is the toughest question, but you've done great
yeah.
so far.
Okay.
So
Pressure's
it's
on.
called Lattes and Leaders for a reason.
Okay. Yep. I got my
So
cup. I'm ready.
what is your hot beverage of choice? Coffee, latte, hot tea? What is your go-to
You know,
beverage?
I bet no one said this to you yet because I think it's more of a Canadian thing. And I'll tell you why. So I'm addicted to any sort of tea latte. However, when I was in New York in January, I walked into the first place and I asked if I could have like a tea latte, and they looked at me like I was crazy. And then I went to another place and they said, like, do you mean you want to order milk and tea? And I'm like, no, like I want to like put them in the cup together. And they were like, well, you can order both and do that yourself. And I was like, okay. And then finally the airport in New York, the Starbucks there, they had a
Starbucks.
London
Yeah.
fog. Yeah, the Starbucks had a London fog, which is which is a Earl Grey tea latte essentially. So yes, so I'm addicted to tea lattes. Definitely Starbucks, and being Canadian, I also really like the steep tea at Tim Hortons, but not coffee, just tea.
Oh,
I was
The
I was
long
about
answer.
to I was about to ask Jeremy what was the place. I spoke in Alberta a couple of years ago, and Jeremy and my other nephew Josh went with us, and they love Tim Hortons. I guess you mentioned
Yeah,
it, so they
oh,
like going there. So
we have a lot of those.
every morning it was like a
everywhere.
mile walk. Yeah, but we made it. Half a mile walk through the snow, uphill both ways, and we did it for Tim Hortons. So.
Well, I think I might have been at the same conference because when I was looking at your information online, I saw the NCTCA conference and I had spoken at that for a few years in a row. So I wonder if we were even there at the same time. We might have even
Oh,
been in the
Maybe.
same
maybe.
Tim
Yeah.
Hortons lineup.
Oh
May
yeah.
have. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for being on today. I loved your story. I love what you're doing, how you're impacting the community, but how you're impacting the students' lives too, with a real world experience that is just so powerful, and I know affects them, in a positive way for the rest of their life. And man, that's if we can do that in education, then we've done a lot. So I thank you for that and for your work and for taking the time to be with us today.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I just feel immense gratitude for not only this opportunity, but just, as educators, we really do have the greatest job and learning from our students every day. We're just so fortunate to be in this line of work.
This has been Lattes and Leaders with Dr. Brad Johnson. We hope that you leave today feeling informed and inspired. For more educational content, be sure to add this podcast to your list and follow Dr. Johnson on any and all social media platforms. For more information on Dr. Johnson, Jeremy Johnson, and special guests, check out drbradjohnson.com. That is DOCTOR, bradjohnson.com. Hope to have you back soon.